to Bitcoin podcast. The only one that's making your money is you. Listen to the Bitcoin podcast. So hold on and listen to the Bitcoin podcast.
Are you working in a job that sucks balls? Does your job suck and ergo your life? Do you want to change that because your life is sucking? Join the TBP Slack. Get a better job.
Hello, Johnny. Welcome to the show. Everybody, we have a wonderful interview for you. We have Jonny Huxtable from LinkPool. I would say looking at the various stuff online, your website, things like that, the TLDR of LinkPool is infrastructure for ChainLink. That a general short way to put what you guys do?
Yeah, right. It's our purpose is to lower the barrier of entry to the ChainLink network, whether that is infrastructure products to staking products, and our other players like the marketplace, for example.
Mm-hmm. You have quite a few services offered, and I think that's a valuable wing of any useful network, and we'll probably get into a little bit more. Do you want to start us off by kind of introducing yourself and saying where you came from, how you got into this ecosystem?
Yeah, sure thing. So I'm Jonny Huxtable, the founder and CTO of LinkPool. We started in 2017, shortly after sort of ChainLink came around. We identified sort of really quite early in the game, around the staking ecosystem for ChainLink, and the need for someone to sort of come in and lower the barrier of entry in that regard. So since then, we've just been working hard from the marketplace to infrastructure players. Me myself, I got into ChainLink when I was actually learning Solidity as a language. So I was sort of developing that and just wondering whether you could actually fetch external data into contracts, which is how I sort of stumbled into it at the lucky time. And the rest is history, really. Sort of been heads down ever since. I barely ever take it back up. This is one of the few times I've actually sort of talked to people recently.
That's probably a good time to start talking to people. And for those that I guess don't know, who've had their head in the sand, ChainLink, I would say, markets themselves as the best way to get real-world data into blockchains.
Right, exactly.
They push the concept of a decentralized Oracle network, which is I think Sergey was recently on Lex Fridman, and he called it the what's it called? Definitive trust. So how two people come to agreement on a specific thing and say, this is what happened. This is the definitive truth of whatever we care about. And ChainLink provides a decentralized way of coming to definitive truth such that blockchains can consume them. So like I can say a specific team won a specific game and do a specific action in a smart contract based on that information, as opposed to relying on some random dude to tell me that. And what you're doing at LinkPool, and this is something that I found useful, is helping people provide that infrastructure, stake their chain, their tokens into the network in the place they want to be, or discover the available data sources they can use in smart contracts.
Yeah. So for us, for example, with what you talked about there with ChainLink, it's been a wild ride for us. It sort of felt like forever when we was working on this way back in 2018 for us to go live on mainnet in 2019. But I think one of the things that I'm pretty proud of, and just seeing it grow over time, is just how it's been a catalyst to the DeFi space, right? How especially the data within price feeds has sort of allowed that whole industry to grow into the behemoth that it is now, which is really good. For us in LinkPool, we're always going to be working on our play into the DeFi space, right? Like you sort of talked about there with staking. And yeah, especially going forward, and you mentioned sports betting, I think that's an area you're probably going to see a lot more on soon. especially like automatic sort of market creation and settlement, which is sort of a really interesting concept. I'd love to see that actually put into practice on chain. And just the non-DeFi applications, so like you said with sports betting and what we do in LinkPool as part of the infrastructure is work with clients to be able to pull whatever data they provide onto the blockchain, right, and think of use cases. One of them I always like to talk about is a team called Watch Signals, and they actually provide like an API for getting the prices of luxury watches. So like, if you actually created a feed, you could get the price of a luxury watch and then create derivatives around that for people to be able to, have a stable coin backed by the price of a watch. For example, you could take that example and then map that to cars, for example, create stable coins of cars based on the used market, which is super interesting.
So people are building Oracle networks around just all kinds of random things, and you're capable of doing that.
Yeah, exactly. For us, it's sort of a bit of a consultancy play, right? Like we'll work with external data providers and help them sort of think about how that data can be used on chain. And for example, on our marketplace, we're working on a rather large update at the minute to sort of showcase that a lot more, especially the different data that people will be providing. But yeah, it's something that we've been dedicating a lot of time on recently because it's interesting. For me, like since ChainLink launched in 2019, and like I mentioned with DeFi, you're seeing a lot of usage on the price feeds and all the different pairs now that ChainLink supports and all the different oracles that are growing onto the networks. But you're not seeing much in the ways of like non-DeFi usage yet. One of the examples Sergey always mentions is insurance. Think of how large the insurance industry is, and especially agricultural insurance. If you had weather data, for example, like water level data, you'd be able to create like automated agricultural sort of farming insurance products on chain that had automatic payouts, which is a really good concept because that makes that sort of product a lot more accessible to a lot more people as well, people who typically wouldn't be able to be insured. So we always used to talk about this in the early days before we went live on mainnet, but the use case really is pretty endless for what you can do, because as long as you've got the data, then you can build some form of contract around that, right? Even like central bank interest rates at the LIBOR rate, everything else. It's you could really sort of, beyond what we're seeing already in DeFi, you can really do a lot more with Chainlink. I think sort of with how it's used at the minute, a lot of people sort of have a bit of tunnel vision on what it can be used for and just think of it as the price feed oracle, but it can really do much more than that. And for us as part of LinkPool, it's really about helping people achieve those goals and providing their data on chain, showcasing it with the websites like we do with the marketplace, and then being able to provide economic security as well with the staking apps, so people can stake their link, back these providers, and people are offering this data on chain, and to actually provide more security to the network. So.
I got a lot of questions. Jess, you got anything?
Nope, not yet. I'll keep listening.
All right, cool. In that case, so I remember we have quite a few people in the Bitcoin podcast Slack, which is the main place of our community, who both work at ChainLink and just are fans of ChainLink. So there's quite a bit of conversation around that ecosystem inside the Slack. I have asked some of them before, how the hell can I run a ChainLink node? Right. And more often than not, the answer is, well, it's complicated.
Yep.
Why?
Well, to begin with, the network is going to be expanding into the keepers model. If you've seen that recently, which is, don't want to get into the weeds too much, but it's a different sort of request model for being able to utilize ChainLink oracles on chain. That will open the door, hopefully, for a lot of other people to become a ChainLink node operator. To begin with, for running nodes, it's semi-trusted in the sense that the feeds are backed by people who run validators on chains and have million stakes, right? There was a sort of a tough sort of filtering and I suppose like application process to become a node operator to begin with, and over time, once the protocol develops, then that the doors will start opening to become an actual node operator yourself, and the first part of that will be the keepers process. I could talk a lot more about sort of the ideas around what we call like the self-service model as well, and reputation, and some of the white paper goes into this as well, the new one, and how there will be sort of advancements within the core software and the protocol itself to allow third parties to become part of the Chainlink network a lot more easily. And of course, like staking will be part of that. So I suppose the answer is sort of it's complicated, but this is one of them things where it's still very much early days within the network. And once advancements are developed and done and sort of tested and hardened over time, then this will become sort of a topic of the past, right? And everyone will be running Chainlink oracles.
I see. So I guess if I had to like take a stab at it, if you're going to build an oracle network that is trustworthy, you're not going to allow anybody to become the provider of data. They're going to need to have like, I guess, be pretty stringent in the stake of the people who are doing this and make sure that they're technically capable of providing quality data. Because you can't want to make an oracle network and it not be very robust, reliable in terms of the feeds that it's giving, particularly because the majority of the early feeds are all price data, which are going to be manipulated if possible. Yeah,
exactly. So it's getting better now, but especially in the early days, the amount of operational overhead, or sort of the amount of time it took to make sure everything was running smoothly, from creating all the right monitoring rules and being able to ensure you're returning the right data and setting everything up, and sort of the setting up and management of all the data sources that you have as a node operator to reply back on chain is pretty intensive. And you've got to make sure if there is any issues with any of the data providers, because sometimes they do mess up, right? We'll use like a huge basket of different APIs, and some of them are faulty from time and time again. You've got to action that quickly. It's just all of those little bits and pieces that make up the sort of the fabric of actually running a node operator will become automated and just easier over time, and the barrier of entry will become a lot lower, especially sort of, I mentioned this before, but the self-service model will sort of really play into that, because it automates the creation of the Chainlink networks and feeds. I mean, you could run Chainlink nodes and get a couple of people together, right? So if you reached out to everyone in your Slack and they were technically minded, like, you could run a bunch of nodes and create a Chainlink feed and actually return data and create a contract, right? Well, that is a price feed, a pairing for something that is not currently on chain, but it's just whether anyone would use it, right? So if you need to pay the oracles, and if no one's using it, you've just got to wonder if it's viable at this point, which will sort of, just sort of, once things are developed, sort of fix itself more down the line.
That's a good question. How would someone evaluate whether or not a given data feed is worth building an oracle for? What's like kind of the economic analysis of discovering whether or not like it's worthwhile to try and build something like that in Chainlink?
Well, when we do this for LinkPool, it doesn't really cost us anything to make that data available. So you can sort of work with the data provider and, be like, you've got this data and we can offer this on chain in this certain format. And then if people start using it, then you can sort of identify how many people are using it, potentially who's using it, and then how you can then take that data and potentially create a feed, like get other node operators involved and actually create that into a fully formed network. And that happened can't really say much more about it, but that happened with the sports data. So, the example you gave to begin with, right? That happened with one of the nodes that we created for that, and that's turning into a full project, which it is now viable to create a feed for, right? And it's going to see a lot of usage and sort of go into sports betting, for example, which I'm quite excited to actually see deployed.
So if you had to toot your own horn, going through a project like yours to test out specific types of data feeds is probably a good route to do, as opposed to trying to do it all yourself.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually got to the point now where ChainLink has sort of that much attention and visibility that a lot of these data providers and people who are sort of familiar in the space are reaching out and saying, we have this data, like, can it be used on chain? Which is always exciting. And, for us, there's actually a huge backlog of people who are looking to do this, because, people see a good opportunity, right? If even if these data providers aren't offering the data themselves through a first party node, then, from their point of view, they can get to a point where you've got a large pocket of nodes that are facilitating a lot of requests for their data, and at the end of the day, that's a moneymaker, right? Because it's just generating those data providers API subscriptions. There's just there's quite a lot of attention for this, so we don't really need to. We sort of did this earlier, and we'd analyze data sources and sort of think about how they could be used, but at this point, we don't need to that much, because we get so much attention that people will just reach out and sort of be like, we've got this data. So it's a good spot.
Yeah, I'd imagine. I can't, based on the way the internet works today, there's a lot of people sitting around who maybe hear about smart contracts or the Oracle issue and go, well, I have data and that's valuable. I want to use it in a smart contract. And the obvious place to go is to figure out, okay, where do I go to do that? That's going to be ChainLink. If they can't figure it out themselves, they use service providers like you to either get consulting on how they can get that information reliably into a blockchain, or whether or not it currently exists and how they're going to add to it.
Yeah, exactly right. So we sort of have two products in this sense. We'll consult them on how to set it up and help them if needed, or we can sort of manage the node for them as well, whereas they have ownership of the keys in the contract. So especially for people who run price data companies, and high quality ones at that, they sort of see what's happening in the crypto space, especially when they're aggregating crypto prices, and be like, we've been working on this problem for a long time, and see what ChainLink is doing and how their price feeds are used in DeFi, and just get really excited and interested, and then reach out. And for us as well, if we're thinking about price networks, the more people that reach out with high quality data is amazing, right? Because it just adds more security to the price feeds and adds more variety in the data. So it's coming from more sources, because the last thing you want to do is rely on a single or a small handful of APIs that all rely on one exchange or something that can easily be gamed, which you've seen a
lot of times.
Yeah.
Like coin market cap price data being read from smart contracts or something.
Yep.
I've seen a tremendous amount of terrible things happen from manipulable feeds.
Yeah, exactly right. Yep.
So I guess seeing the various ways people can interact with LinkPool as a proxy for contributing to ChainLink, where are you seeing the majority of desire from the end user? Is it people who want to run nodes? Is it people who want to they have ChainLink and they want to throw money at it, but they don't know exactly where? Or are they looking for the data to use themselves?
I mean, I feel like if you tallied it all up and you got the raw numbers, you'd probably see more people wanting to run nodes and be part of this, right? Which is a good thing, because when that's possible, it just adds security to the network. At the minute, the big interest from a lot of people is DeFi projects and different blockchains, because ChainLink at the minute is running on Ethereum, Binance Chain, like Matic, for example, XDAI, and from an integrations point of view, there's all these blockchains that want to get into the DeFi game, and they might be working on a layer 2. It might just be another sort of layer 1 chain that is high throughput, something like Avalanche, and they want to be able to get these price feeds on their blockchain network to be able to facilitate the DeFi applications, right? I mean, just sort of look at what Pancake Swap did recently on BSC. They integrated the BNB feed on BSC, for example, in their DeFi app. So there's a lot of sort of people wanting Chainlink on their network because they want a slice of the DeFi pie, right? They want to be able to test their throughput, get the users on, and everything else, which is good as well. It's expensive from an infrastructure point of view, because for us, like as part of LinkPool, right, we need to spin up like full nodes and validators across all of these networks. We need to have like DR and failover and HA all that. All of that stuff on these networks, so that gets expensive, but it's worth it, and it's exciting. Really, it only sort of solidifies our place in the ecosystem, because we're building foundations to be able to facilitate all these different networks.
Is Chainlink leveraging you guys quite a bit in order to kind of help facilitate the ecosystem running infrastructure, or are they like what's the I guess relationship between the Chainlink organization and services like infrastructure as a service like you?
Sure. I mean, Chainlink as a project has, it reaches out and speaks to quite a lot of the node operators. It needs to have the constant communication there. For LinkPool, we got a grant for marketplace development. And that was really important for us, because it allowed us to actually, bring more talented people on and think about how we can actually build out the marketplace and add more features to it. That range from what we've done with like adding OCR feeds to the data marketplace that we're thinking about, is the keepers support as well, and all the different blockchains. So that's really helps us in that regard. They don't, use our infrastructure. Chainlink have their own sort of, typical like DevOps and infrastructure scene, like crypto companies do. But yeah, Chainlink as a company likes to sort of be in touch with the third parties, right? Because at the end of the day, for them, it's important, because they want to encourage people to build on their network and platform. It's why you see like the big hackathons and the prizes and everything else for using Chainlink and building on top of it. So it's very much like just giving back to the community and the people who care about Chainlink and want to build good stuff on it, which is only a good thing. One of the sort of grants I really sort of liked when I saw it announced was there's technical, but there's like a code base, like a open source project, and the Chainlink core node, like the core Oracle software, uses this to manage its database. And this project was maintained pretty much by a single guy mostly. And, they gave him a grant to be able to, like scale up and maintain it more, and actually sort of commit to working on that project, which is a good thing, because like open source devs, especially if you're working on like a large code base, go pretty much unloved, right? Everyone sort of raises like, oh, there's a bug here and there's an issue there. But yeah, so actually give financial backing to it, and it makes sense because it's a critical sort of library for them to use. It's good to give back in that regard.
What do you got, Jesse? Hit him with something.
Beyond price data, what kind of projects do you see using your services?
Yeah, the non-DeFi space is going to be interesting. I mean, before Chainlink went live in mainnet in 2019, it's like all of us knew the price data would be the most important data to be providing to the network. We didn't really envisage sort of how it had exploded into the DeFi world, that exists now. I think the two main things are going to be betting, like sports betting, and the insurance market, like I mentioned before. Sports betting, in terms of the data sources, is relatively easy, right? You're going to be able to get quite a few like APIs for like different leagues. So it's a pretty feasible one, and we should hopefully see more on that soon. And insurance is something I mentioned. This didn't actually use Chainlink back in the day, but there was like a proof of concept from AXA called, what's it called now, like Fizzy or something, and it was smart contract based flight insurance. So it was a deployed Ethereum contract. You put your flight number in, you paid like a small deposit in Ethereum, and if your flight was something like 3 hours late or it got cancelled, then you got an automatic payout, and that data was, returned from off-chain on-chain using an oracle. It weren't Chainlink at the time, but it sort of gives you a glimpse into what could be done right with products like that.
I'm curious if you know of any projects that are kind of trying to onboard patient information, but in a way that keeps the information secure.
I suppose like medical records and stuff, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Not that I know of, but I think, the blockchain as a whole, this could be different with layer 2 networks, but like blockchains and settlement layers aren't really suited to the mass of data from something like that, right? It's really about asserting what is true in that regard. So that's when you'd start actually probably more so putting hashes on chain of certain types of data, which wouldn't actually reveal the data. But if you had a typical like legacy system, for example, and you were sharing data between multiple parties, then you could encrypt like certain hashes with keys that you hold between yourselves, and then make sure that data is true by just checking a hash on chain. So it keeps like a source of truth without actually revealing the data. But I mean, for projects that are actually doing this like right now, sort of in testnet or production, I don't know of. Pretty much anything that I see these days is all DeFi related, or just sort of like new things coming around.
The DeFi space is kind of what is generating a good portion of the development anyway, just because that's where most of the money is as it currently stands. And it's also obvious that the technology works for this type of thing. And it's obvious that you need an oracle in order to have like security around the things that are like the financial products that are built. Something I built when I was, how long's it been? I don't know, 5 years ago, 4 years ago? I forget. I built a private POC for a shipping company that basically guaranteed that a specific product didn't go outside of set boundaries, whether it be, it was like a real world device that had like 4G or maybe I could have been Edge, I forget, very, very low cost IoT device that had accelerometers, temperature control, like humidity controls, sensors, things like that. It was for shipping. So it's basically guaranteeing that a specific shipping product didn't go outside of the extremes in the process of shipping it. And I could see something like that as it ties into insurance being something quite useful or incredibly valuable for giving guarantees around the quality assurance of a given service. Because like if you think about like I guess what Sergey tries to try and push is the concept of definitive truth. Mm-hmm. And that is, what is something that me and you agree upon that we then come into an agreement on. So like what is a thing that we need to be true in the real world that dictates an agreement we're going to have? For financial instruments, it's obvious. What's the price?
Yep.
And based on specific price movements, we're going to do X, Y, and Z. But for insurance, it's a lot of different things, and that's going to be like, what's the weather like? What was the quality? Did X, Y, and Z happen to this item over this given period of time? If so, pay out this person. If not, pay out this person. And so when you think about the definitive truth, it's how do we figure out X, Y, and Z in a reasonable way, and then insert that into the contract so that it can make the right decision.
Yeah, one of the, well, I'm presuming actually for that POC that you built, you had to get that data into an Ethereum smart contract somehow. So I'm guessing you wrote like a script or something to do it, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So we did basically embedded keys into like secure architecture of those chips that would sign transactions and submit them to the blockchain.
Oh, okay.
So you had basically like a manufacturing process for these chips that would lock a given key to an IoT device. And you had a way to kind of maintain the value on those keys through a central repository. It's a private blockchain, so who cares in terms of all you care about is the quality of the data, which is mainly on the validators and not individual IoT devices.
Yep. In this market, I think one of the core things for it to take off is the abundance of data, right? So I think even, you talked about weather data there, but say, for example, if you have 3 data sources, but at the end of the day, they're pointing to the same weather station, that weather station gets ripped up in a tornado and it's suddenly not working anymore and provides bad data, like you've got a problem. So I think like the abundance of data and just like this sort of product going more into the mainstream that kickstarts this entire data economy, basically. In the early days of Chainlink, we used to talk about this and sort of how much the API market was worth, and I can't really remember the numbers, but it was a big amount, but not really that big when you think about it. And data is the new oil, right, in terms of value, and it's only going to get more valuable as time goes on. So in the future, when it's just a lot more data about many different things and how this can be used from IoT devices on cars, and you've always got to think about like privacy and openness issues, but blockchain helps in that, and it's the amount of use cases you can do. Supply chains is always a very interesting one, right? And you always need an oracle for that sort of stuff. So I'd love to see just anything like that being built. And I can sit here and sort of do some high-level spitballing on what it could look like, or we write some PLCs. But I think what's shown in DeFi is just like whatever ideas you have about how something is going to look when it's used is just going to be wrong, and it's just going to take form into an entirely different beast, which is not a bad thing. Just many minds sort of working on the same problem, right?
But I think you'll come to see over the course of, let's assume that the concept of hybrid smart contracts or hybrid contracts is a thing, and that's kind of the combination of on-chain and off-chain computation. Off-chain computation being where Chainlink comes into most of it. If this is like kind of the future of what this technology provides, what you're probably going to find is some type of like coalescence or like coming together on what is valuable data, as opposed to like what's just extraneous data that isn't useful, because it's not being used. And so like if you think about how data has grown as a commodity in the internet, it's everyone hoards all information but doesn't know what to do with it in like today's day and age, right? You think about a small company who has a website, they gather all possible metrics and then hire data science and say, what do we have? Tell me what I have. And they don't really know. Something like this hybrid contract concept tells you what people are looking for and the associated value movements of using that data. So like how someone uses a specific type of data and how it needs to be structured so it can be used, and then the consequential value placed like derived from that data. I think it's a very obvious way to figure out like what type of data should we be looking for, and how do we come to agreement on how it should be structured and sent into something that like where value transfer happens.
Sure. I mean, that's a really good point, because especially with all of this being open, it's the amount of analytics you can do in form of data, right, and how it's used and how much it's used and what is actually needed is just going to sort of it's just going to bootstrap that industry, right, and just make it more specific and less underutilized. It's a really good point, and I think we're going to sort of see a lot more of this going forward, because it's sort of like what happened with like DeFi, right, in the early days of like compound and synthetics. All it takes is sort of a couple of projects to lead the way and show how it can be done, and for it to get traction, for everyone to start looking at this and start getting ideas, and then the whole thing explodes. So I'm looking forward to that. And I think, one of the first catalysts really is, mentioned it many times, but sports betting, especially automatic market creation and just automatic settlement, without just third-party bookies.
Have you looked at older projects trying to capture that market, like Augur, and where they may have, I don't know if you call them if they failed, but why they didn't explode as much? And I think that could be based on the Oracle issue.
Yeah. I mean,
because that's what that is, right? Like that was all just a betting market, but it's a decentralized betting market.
I think one of the issues there was, like in Augur, the market creation is mostly manual, right? So if you wanted to create a sports betting market, you'd actually have to go in, and then you'd assign someone who would be providing that data, and then you'd have to go through like the settlement process. So actually providing it, and then like layers of arbitration. So I think you're going to see that advance the more time goes on. The more sports data that is available, and the more people think about this problem. I think it's going to take off, especially when you think about just betting markets and the reliance of third parties for this sort of thing. It's completely unrelated, but even take the example of what happened with Robinhood again today. Like pausing crypto trading, for example. Mm-hmm. People are quickly realizing that when you use third parties like this and you've got money in these platforms, the window of acceptable sort of operations for these platforms is relatively slim. So I think it'll keep on growing.
Yeah, I can see the wheels turning in Jesse's brain as he thinks about applications for medical use and all this. His brain stays in the medical world currently, so he's always thinking about that.
There was, it's sort of completely unrelated, but from a technical point of view, it's a bit similar. But we had random talks with a team. It must have been years ago now, but they was thinking of like a proof of concept for like actual like building designs, and I forget the name of the diagram, but it's like the detailed like building designs, right, where it goes into like a plug socket on a wall and a light switch and everything.
Like
else.
Revit?
Yeah. Like what? Sorry.
It's called. There's a software that's used in the industry. It's called Revit.
Right. Okay.
Everything is a smart object.
It was just when we was talking about this, there was like companies working together, and they'd sort of update these diagrams, mm-hmm. and they'd be like, whose is actually correct and what version was based from and everything else. And just it's like it's almost like version control, right? And just being actually able to share what is the source of truth and being able to interact with different parties, because in the legacy world, right, if you want to plug in with a different company and share data in a certain way, you need to actually build a backend that can actually interact with theirs and speak the same language. Whereas if everyone's using the blockchain and that is like the ultimate settlement layer, then everyone is dancing to the same song, right? It's like everyone's working to the same standard. So,
It's a decent way to wrap up here. Jesse, you want to hit him with? We have a couple signature questions we ask everybody, so get ready for those. Jesse, hit him with yours, and I'll finish up with the other one.
All right, Jonny. Is what you do actually hard?
Yeah. Sometimes it is, especially when. I just want to quote the "This is fine" meme, right? When things are on fire sometimes, and it's like you're scrambling. It is. You've got to, a lot of the things that you build as part of ChainLink are, and the protocols that you work on and help test and develop first. So it's, you know, you've got to be sort of on your toes and thinking about things in a fresh way, and really sort of think outside of the box, really, to try and be the best at what you're doing.
I've always seen services like yours, because there's a lot of them across the blockchain ecosystem. For every network, there is a myriad of services like yours that is doing more of the hand-holding, translating the technical into a way that's approachable to a larger group of people. That's hard, especially based in my experience on the documentation of all these things, and the software that you use to run the networks isn't necessarily straightforward or up to, you know, quality code standards in a lot of ways. And you have to make that approachable.
Yeah, certainly in a lot of ways. I mean, I'm not going to start name calling different networks, but yeah, it's like, some of it is problematic in some ways, and it's difficult to, make hardened and production ready. One of the things with Chainlink, especially when you're running like blockchain services, I've seen someone speak about this today on Twitter, right? It's like APIs, like public APIs and RPCs being down. Like, you just can't do that for Chainlink. You've always got to get like block headers in like straight away. Your latencies have got to be like on point. It's, it's running a full node and it being in sync most of the time, and then there's running a full node and it sort of being the best full node on the network. So it's always a challenge. It's
very different, especially in the terms of scale. It's like if you're running a public API or a consumable RPC for people, and something happens on the network and you're the main, like, think about Infura, right?
Yeah.
For Ethereum, like there's like running a node on Ethereum, especially for archival data, is hard. And the scale at which any given archive node can handle requests is low. So it's a tremendous amount of resources to deal with spike, spike requests, like a bunch of people hammering your service as fast as possible, and then being like, listen, this sucks. Your service sucks, because they don't understand a lot of the infrastructure that goes in the back of providing such a service. And most of that's standard practice. Like, we've made it hard on ourselves in terms of infrastructure, and making it easy to scale and provide quality services to people who don't have to run things. Yeah. So kudos to people like you who make it look easy and make it easier for people to like get into these networks and start participating, because more often than not, that's what really needs to happen.
I appreciate it. It makes the 4 a.m. PagerDuty call outs where I get woke up in the night worth it. So yeah, thank you for that. Yeah.
I'm personally a fan of infrastructure, so these things mean a lot to me. And my question is a much easier one. Well, maybe not. Can you describe blockchain in 10 words or less?
It's a trustless settlement layer allowing people to exchange and define contractual agreements without any third parties. That probably wasn't 10 words.
Maybe like 1 or 2 over. I lost it.
Yeah.
You're close though, and that was a good answer. All right, Jonny, thanks for coming on the show. I definitely appreciate it, and hope to hear back from you soon.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Speak soon.